You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. Alongside Matt Adams, I'm Dave Griffiths. Appreciate you joining us. If you're watching on YouTube or on our Fox 59 Now app, available on Roku, Apple TV, so many other places as well. Appreciate that. Whatever you choose to bring us in. There are a lot more Colts now brought into the fold here in central Indiana after the draft is wrapped up last week. I think, Matt, the first round, there were a lot of Colts fans celebrating after that, maybe after the entire thing as well, but it doesn't always work out how we think it's going to work out. This time, the first round worked out how the ideal way most Colts fans would have thought coming into this draft or would have liked it to work out.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I mean, for something to go right for the Colts lately, just feels like something that has not happened a lot. And, you know, specifically with the way the draft fell, we'll talk about it a little bit. But when the Jaguars traded up there to number 2, that was a team that maybe some of those drafts had going with a tight end. That didn't happen. They traded up to get an excellent player in Travis Hunter. You know, that took a tight end away there. 7, New York, almost, depending on the mock draft, had them going tight end, had them going Tyler Warren. They didn't. And then there weren't really a lot of teams left that needed a tight end, but Chicago, you know, at 10, wanted a tight end, but they got a different tight end than what the Colts needed. And so, you know, they talk about Warren falling in the draft, and he kind of fell into the Colts' hands, but not in a bad way. It's not like all these teams pass on him because he was overrated or whatever. It just things worked out for the Colts.
Exactly. And so that's something big to celebrate and to be excited about, I think, if you're a Colts fan coming out of this draft. Of course, there's 7 other players, and we'll talk about all of them today. Maybe touch a little bit on the AFC South that you briefly mentioned as well, with the Jaguars moving up, the Titans picking at number 1, the Texans moving back themselves and picking something that I think is very notable. And like I said, we'll discuss that maybe a little bit more later, or maybe get a little bit more in depth on the rest of the AFC South next week. But our focus today has to be the 2025 Colts draft class. And that begins at 14th overall. The Colts stand pat, which I wouldn't have been surprised to see Chris Ballard move back. He said, talking about drafting Tyler Warren 14th overall, that they never really considered moving up too much when he spoke to us later, even though, as you mentioned there, Matt, the kind of the thought was Warren was falling in, I guess,
relative terms. I mean, because again, a lot of people had him pegged as a top 10 draft pick for sure.
And maybe outside of the wide receiver cornerback combo of Travis Hunter, the best offensive weapon in this draft.
Just Mr. Do-It-All, Mr. All-Around. You want somebody who's going to improve your offense immediately, this is the guy to go and get.
Right, and that's what the Colts needed. They needed another weapon for Anthony Richardson. They needed a more reliable short yardage receiver. They needed someone in the tight end room, period.
Yes.
And they got all of that in Tyler Warren out of Penn State. It's got to be Chris Ballard said it was his easiest pick to go up and make to snag his name off the board since Quentin Nelson, and it goes to show the type of player the Colts wanted. It shows what am I trying to say? It shows the need the Colts had at that position, and it shows what they liked about Tyler Warren. He's a big guy. He's a 3-down tight end, which they had talked about before the draft, of wanting a guy who is a blocker and a receiver, both at the same time. I mean, more than 100 catches, more than 1,000 yards. He scored 25 touchdowns in his career there at Penn State. The guy got into the end zone multiple ways. He played center on one snap, for crying out loud. He played all over the field. I hope that he doesn't have to play center here for any reason. That would be weird. But he met the need, and the Colts got him. It's hard to question this pick at all right now, because it was the most obvious need the Colts had. They had some others that I think weren't addressed that we'll get into later, but when the Colts took the clock at 14th overall and Tyler Warren was still there, they took about a half a second. They were one of the quickest picks there in the first round to put his name in and be like, okay, we're done here.
It's like the Colts are on the clock. The pick is in.
Exactly.
Essentially is what happened.
Wrap it up for the day, which I was grateful for since I was at the Colts complex. I didn't want to be there until 11:30 at night, but that's neither here nor there. Tyler Warren immediately comes in as a starter in the Colts offense. He immediately improves the Colts offense. and you've got to be thrilled with that. That's it. There's nothing to be unhappy about in this pick of Tyler Warren. Everyone else slides into different roles as a tight end. Mo is still a blocker. Great. You can bring him in 2 tight end sets when you're in jumbo. Drew Ogletree's probably you're more of the receiving guy, and I don't know if Will Mallory's going to step in. I'm not counting on Jelani Woods for anything.
Yeah, you just
don't.
You just don't know. Big question mark with Jelani.
But it's Tyler now. It's Tyler Woods, and he's got to run with it. Concerns about him. The only concern that I have when I'm thinking about Tyler Warren is durability, because he caught 104 catches balls last year. He ran it too. Like, there was a lot of workload on him last year. And he gets hit a lot. He drags.
And he invites it.
He does. He drags tacklers. And for the tight end, that's not abnormal at all.
No, but you do wonder with a guy who played a long time at college, tire tread, wear on the tires, what they always say about these guys.
But that's just a concern, like a mild concern right now. Like, there's no reason for me to believe that he's injury prone. There's no reason particular in that fact. It's just the one thing that kind of makes you go, but it's not enough to not draft him at 14th overall, when this need is so blatantly obvious. The Colts say they valued his size, his IQ, his versatility. The area scout Chad Henry, who is known for his nicknames like Hurricane, Dio, Odangbo, gave Warren the nickname Truck, because he's tough and he's reliable. And he says he's maybe not a truck guy, but he might be now after the contract that he's going to sign with the team over the next couple weeks. But I like I said, you've got to be thrilled, because this is an obvious place where need met availability, and to get him at 14 is I was stunned. I was stunned he was still there at 14 with all the other drafts out there, with all the other mock drafts out there, with all the other teams up ahead of the Colts who could use offensive weapons. And we know how important offensive weapons are, giving your quarterbacks opportunities to be good and giving them no excuses to be bad. And Tyler Warren is part of that, is a no excuse draft pick. Is okay. We know we had a problem at tight end last year for Anthony Richardson. All right. It should not be an excuse anymore. Like, I don't want to call him George Kittle right now. I'm not going to call him Travis Kelce or Antonio Gates. But I am going to call them infinitely better than what they had last year.
100%. I mean, it just goes to show in that USC game, which Ballard mentioned it. I think a couple of the area scouts may have mentioned that game. 17 catches, more than 220 yards against USC, had a touchdown in that game. And that was like better than the production of like the Colts tight end.
Exactly. For like the entire season, like one game, pretty much. So there you go. There's the Colts pick at tight end. Be thrilled with it. Be happy with it. Like, completely. And I totally look forward to seeing him. Our first impressions of him was he reminded me a lot of Quentin Nelson when he was talking.
Okay.
Like, he just had that business attitude, a toughness attitude in him. So if he's anything like Quentin in terms of toughness, then fantastic. And that's something we'll get to with, I think, some more of these players, Matt, is that's the word that either scouts or Chris Ballard or Shane Steichen kept coming back to with a lot of these draft picks, was toughness. Like, it's not always a draft class gets a sweeping word to describe it, whether it's versatile, athletic, and the Colts have had those in the past, athletic draft classes. This one is not as much as it has been in the past, but the word that kept coming back to with describing these guys was toughness. So I think that is also a characteristic that the Colts wanted to instill in their roster this year. They thought they were not tough enough. And this roster, this draft class, not that individual players weren't tough. I'm not saying
but
that.
Just as a whole, it feels like the team could use a little bit of a boost. Guys that are just sort of real, as a whole, as an entire unit.
And they want to be a tough team, particularly on offense. This is nothing new. Like, they wanted to be an offense that grinds you into the turf. Like, that's what Jonathan Taylor's still their best offensive player. I'm not saying that Tyler Warren's surpassing him by any stretch of the imagination. Like, they still want to be a team that runs the ball primarily and is just tougher than you. And in the third and fourth quarter, especially, like the other team's giving up or they can't do anything else about you because you just kept getting
you've just
pushed
worn
into
them
the
down
turf.
into submission,
And
and that's what they want to do.
Exactly. And so Tyler Warren plays a part in that, as well as being better in the passing game as well, to give Anthony Richardson another option there. So that's Tyler Warren. Let's get into the second round and continue with our analysis here. The Colts at 45 overall draft JT Tuimoloau, which is the main reason, actually, our Mike Chappell's not here this week. He just didn't want to pronounce Tuimoloau over and over. He can spell it, but joking aside, like, Polynesian players, I love them because you just pronounce every letter, and it's very straightforward.
Makes it easy, right?
Exactly. So JT Tuimoloau, thank you. Defensive end for Ohio State, comes in and is hopefully going to improve a spot that was not up to par last year. The defensive line 2 years ago was one of the best in terms of getting after the quarterback in the NFL. Last year, it certainly was not. They took a big step back. They were one of the worst teams in the league in terms of pressuring the quarterback. They lost Dayo Odangbo in free agency, but now it's going to be, in part, JT Tuimoloau mixing in there and seeing exactly how he fits in. That is something we will find out. But Tuimoloau, he plays a little bit inside, mostly outside. He had a good athleticism score, 9.36 on the RAS scale. He had a great finish in the college football playoff as Ohio State went on to that national championship. Tuimoloau had multiple sacks, 6.5 sacks during the playoff run, which for a 12.5 sack season, he had 6 during the season, which is it's good in a 12-game season. But then to have 6 over the last 3 or 4 games down the stretch is remarkable. And in those games, you're going up against some of the best competition in college football. You're playing some of the best tackles in the game, and you're playing your best football at that time. So that's one thing that stood out about Tuimoloau for the Colts as they got him there in the second round. They're hoping that he can provide some of that spark that he got down the stretch to the team this season. And when you look at the Colts defensive ends and that you ask how exactly he fits in, you're adding competition there, which is always good, and you can never have too many pass rushers. Samson Ebukam coming back from his injury, Laiatu Latu, your first-round pick last year, Kwity Paye, who you just signed to you announced to his picked up his 5th year. The other he's still here, and not just announced. That was a little while ago, but and then those 3 guys and JT are probably your 4 primary edge pass rushers right now. You got Tyquan Lewis, who's there at the same time, who can play inside and outside, who they signed 2 years ago. I guess he's in the last year of his contract, but another Ohio State guy who has some position versatility there. So Tuimoloau comes in and, like, it's not your biggest position of need. There are other needs, which I said, like, we'll get to that in a little bit, that there are some needs that really weren't met in this draft. But Tuimoloau is a guy who was athletic and productive both, and played his best football at the end of the year. So you can say his arrow's pointing up. So I think it's another pick to be that made a lot of sense to me when they took it, Matt.
Well, again, it may not have stuck out as necessarily a need, but there were some of the mock drafts, and there was some thought that the Colts needed to go out and get another edge rusher.
Yep.
Because of the loss of Dayo, and the team loved him. They loved Odangbo. They loved the Hurricane, if you will, but he went somewhere else. They lost an edge rusher. There's some uncertainty with Ebukam, whether he's going to be able to come back full force from that Achilles injury. And so edge rusher was a need. And I think it'd be interesting to know if, we won't necessarily know, but there was that linebacker from UCLA. He went right at the beginning,
Carson
Schwetzinger, at the top of the second round. I don't know if the Colts had their eyes on him or not, but, then I think they thought he might be there. He wasn't. Again, I don't know for sure. I'm kind of speaking out of turn on that. But, they went with their next available, what they thought was their next best guy. And their next best guy was an edge rusher from Ohio State. And anybody who watched the college football playoff, he was a monster.
Yep, he was everywhere, man.
In those games for the Ohio State Buckeyes in their championship run. 6.5 sacks over those games. He was terrorizing quarterbacks. He's more of a power guy than a speed guy, but you can also slot him in, and he's strong against the run as well. So he's got a little bit of that. He brings a lot of what Odangbo brings to you. I don't know if he has raw athleticism that Dio had, but still it's a great at the very least, very least, a great rotational piece for the Colts.
Very much so. And I still don't know how much we still don't know how much Lou Anarumo is going to change the rotation on the defensive line.
Right. Yeah. We don't know.
Who knows if it's going to be more 50-50 between the first unit and second unit,
Right.
or like 70-30. We'll find that out during the year. But this is certainly a player who's going to see time, who's going to play, and they hope to get some production out of him. And it's like I say before, Matt, that this is not a big position of need, but it is a position of need because like you mentioned, they lost Dio, so there's a position to be filled there, and you can't just completely rely on Samson Ebukam to come back and be the 9.5, 10 sack player he was in his 1 year before here, because that was the best season of his career in the NFL. So, like, it could have been an outlier season for all I know. I don't think it is. I think Samson's a pretty good player, and he found a really good role here with the Colts.
It's more of a health concern,
exactly,
with Samson.
And that's the thing. You can't just say like they have bigger needs. So, why didn't they take a guard here? Because they might need someone in that position. They might need a will linebacker because they might need someone to start in that position and maybe play some more snaps. Well, like, this is someone who might play fewer snaps than obviously a starting guard or a starting will linebacker, but a defensive lineman has the chance to be very effective in the snaps that he plays. So I do still think that I'm not sitting here saying that guard and will are finalized by any stretch of the imagination, but I am saying that I think that Tuimoloau can be an effective and useful player for the Colts this year, and so I think this is like I got that some Colts fans weren't thrilled with this second round pick because you saw bigger needs elsewhere, but I still think that this was a need at the end of the day. Was it their biggest? In my opinion, no. Was it one? Yes. So I think it's a fine pick, very much fine. It's not in the same vein as the first round pick where perfect need met perfect player who fell to you at the same time. But it's still he seems like it's a pick that makes sense to me.
I think any team would have been happy to have this guy. Probably depends on the defensive system, what you need out of a player and stuff. But for the Colts, this is a good fit. I think their first two picks, especially in this draft, really, even though you could probably say edge wasn't as pressing of a need as inside offensive lineman or linebacker, but this is still a need for the team. I think they got a good player here in the second round.
And that brings me to the Colts' third round pick. Justin Walley, cornerback out of Minnesota. In the third round, they take him 80th overall. This was the first pick that kind of raised my eyebrows, saying, what now?
Yeah.
Who now?
You were not the only person doing that.
Exactly. So I'll follow that by saying, like, talking to him, like, he seemed like a young man with a good head on his shoulders, and I'm not, again, not questioning the guy, but I'm questioning the pick. Like, in the third round, is this the best value for the team that was out there? And I don't know. I'm not a scout. Right. Obviously, the Colts scouts think he was.
Right.
But it was a pick that puzzled me for multiple reasons. I think primarily was his size. He's 5'10".
Mm-hmm.
Chris Ballard doesn't draft 5'10" cornerbacks, especially in the third round.
We've talked about it many times. Kenny Moore is the outlier here on the Colts, and he didn't want to bring him in primarily based on his size.
So this system. It was just a very strange pick, and it's not like he had other aspects that were just athletic traits that were so dynamic that it outweighed his size. His RAS score was a 5.97. Right.
Which, if this guy had come in with a 9.6 RAS, then that would solve
exactly.
the equation,
which for a 5'10" corner, that'd be remarkable. Obviously size has something to do with that score.
That's factored into that, yes.
Right, but there were knocks on his size and his vertical jump, which for cornerback, you need to be able to jump high.
Their offensive line guy that they picked in the Jaylen Travis that they picked in the fourth round had a better vertical than the corner.
That's
insane,
not great.
Not?
Yeah, it's insane for him, for Travis, your offensive tackle, who we'll get to. But Walley, this he could come in and he could be fantastic. He could take over the number one quarterback job for all I know. He could completely come into his own, and I could be completely wrong. But man, it just made very little sense in terms of what Chris Ballard has done in the past, who they have on their roster in this position, and just the stature and makeup of who Walley is on the field. Am I saying he's made no good plays? Of course not. He's made some fine plays
of course
on
not.
the field for Minnesota.
I mean, if you looked at his PFF rating, he's had a pretty good completion percentage against him, and some of those things that are a little more abstract to those of us who aren't necessarily in the weeds on the football, on the X's and O's side of things. But you look at the size, and then this guy probably isn't going to be an outside corner, but are you size wise? It's a comp for maybe Kenny Moore,
right?
Are you going to play him slot nickel? Are you going to make him a nickel quarterback? Is he going to be Kenny's successor in a few years?
Kenny ain't coming off that field. He better not be coming off that field. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
Again, every team's got different needs. They evaluate their own guys independently of what draft analyst from CBS Sports says, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the NFL.com draft projection on Walley had him going in the 6th round.
Right.
They noted he was an experienced cornerback. He played a lot of snaps at Minnesota. He's a tough kid. He's quick, but there's a lot of questions about his size and that sort of thing, and how Minnesota sometimes used him, and whether or not that would translate over into the pro game. And so I think for a lot of people, this was a bit of a head scratcher at 3. But again, the Colts have their own evaluations. They obviously like this kid. They've got a role for him that they've envisioned. And so they're just kind of asking you as fans and as people who cover the team to sort of trust the process here on this one.
He's going to have to come and outcompete other people.
Absolutely.
And that's how he's going to earn playing time. If he just outcompetes other people who are on this roster right now. So
I even saw some people describe this as a luxury pick for the Colts, because it doesn't necessarily fit an immediate need for them, and they kind of reached for a player that they liked.
Yeah. At corner now, if you go down the list, they've got Charvarius Ward, obviously, who they just signed, top cornerback. Jalen Jones has been a starter for a couple years now, 7th round pick a couple years ago. Juju Brents is the guy they would love to see develop into that other starting role outside of Charvarius Ward. And you have Kenny Moore, obviously, as your slot. You've signed guys like Corey Ballantyne to be a backup. Last year, you signed a guy like Sam Womack to be a backup. So I just rattled off 6 cornerbacks right there. I don't know if Walley is better than any of them.
Right.
I just don't right now. So does he ever get on the field? Shoot, does he? I don't know. Does he have a role in special teams at 5'10"? That's pretty small for a gunner on special teams.
You wouldn't necessarily want to spend a 3rd round pick on a guy who you want to be an excellent special teams
guy.
So
like I said, it's just a puzzling pick to me. If we go out there for training camp at Westfield at Grand Park later this year, and he's just out competing everybody, and nobody can complete a pass when you throw in his direction, I'm gonna be like, okay, now I can see why they drafted him. But right now I can't. I just, and 3rd round is a pick that you'd like to see some production from. Your developmental guys usually are taken a little bit later on that last day.
He's not going to be an immediate starter.
Right.
He's not going to be an immediate backup.
Right.
At a position, at least not right now. So I guess we'll figure it out.
Yeah, so I get why people describe it as a luxury pick. I wouldn't call it that because I don't think cornerback is a luxury right now.
No, not for the Colts. It's not what we've seen from the Colts the last couple of years.
It's just a pick that puzzled me that I can't explain like I explained the first 2. And I'll be able to explain, I think, a little bit more of them. So
I think the rest of their picks in the draft makes some sense. And then again, I'm not a draft prognosticator. You've listened to the podcast, everybody. But it just didn't. Again, a lot of these folks had him going late round, 6th round, and the Colts put him in at 3. Surprised a lot of people. Now, there are some draft analysts who really like the pick here because they feel this guy really fits the Colts system. He's an intelligent player, and he's skilled, and he's played a lot of football at Minnesota, and that counts for something.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll just, again, have to wait. See, draft grades are stupid anyway. We'll do them.
We'll do them anyway.
We'll do them anyway because, as Bill Polianoff said, you don't really know about a draft until about 3 years in.
It's true. And if the Colts are all of a sudden going to be a team that plays a lot of dime defense and plays a lot of corners, a lot and safeties out there, maybe he carves out a role in that.
And that's probably very true too. And that might also be something we'll get to a little bit later with their 7th round pick.
Indeed. A little deep tease there, Matt. Good job. You are watching the Colts Blue Zone podcast on Fox 59 now. Into the 4th round, the Colts draft Iowa State offensive tackle Jaylen Travis, who, if you put 3 of me together, would probably come about to the size of this man. He is 6'8" ish, 6'7", 6'8", 340 pounds.
Just a massive dude.
Big guy. And the Colts do go outside on the offensive line for their 1 pick there, which I kind of predicted as we did our draft lead up instead of going inside. Like, I think that this drafting of 1 tackle, Matt, we'll touch on this quickly before we get to Travis, but like drafting a tackle as a developmental guy in the 4th round and not using an earlier pick on inside in the guard gives Matt Gonzalez right now, gives us the idea that he is going to slide into that starting right guard role unless they sign someone else later in free agency.
They could.
But right now, there's no one else on this roster, I don't think, who would be in that role over Gonzalez.
He's not.
He's not on the roster.
And he's a free agent. Right
exactly. So right now, it seems like as we stand, Matt Gonzalez is your right guard, Braden Smith is your right tackle, and of course, Tanner Bortolini is your center. Left guard and left tackle have been solidified for a while with Quentin and with Bernard. So we go to Jaylen Travis, who they draft to perhaps be a developmental prospect at tackle to compete with the kid out of BYU they took a couple years ago, Blake Freeland, for the swing tackle role. They traded down 10 spots and picked up a 6th rounder for the Rams for this pick. So they got on the clock in the 4th round and traded down, which, as I love to say, they love this guy so much they traded back to get him.
Spots to get him, right?
Exactly. So instead of going with a guard, they picked Travis, who's a big dude. He has a decent RAS score of 9.09. A lot of that obviously has to do with his size and being
big, good reach.
Like,
no problems with arm length on this one.
Not at all. And he is also a guy who, over the past year, you're talking to the scouts that analyzed him. I believe it was one of the Midwest scouts that talked about him on draft day. The Colts always bring out some of the scouts that scouted all these guys, and we're able to talk to them to get their take on these guys, which is really helpful, which is really cool. And about Travis, they said that since he transferred from Princeton for his first couple years, and then he transferred to Iowa State for this last season, like, he got better throughout the season. And that's what you would hope for a guy like that who played at an Ivy League school for a couple years.
Moves up to the Big 12, right?
And then all of a sudden, like, he's continually getting better as he's getting better coaching, as he's like, the worst thing you could do in this scenario is see, like, kind of a guy stagnate or go down throughout the year because you realize that he can't live up to playing against this competition. Well, it seems like Jaylen Travis was able to play.
Right. As the competition got better, he was able to elevate to that.
Exactly.
It's like exactly what you want to see, right?
Right. And so the hope is that arrow continues to go up for him and the trajectory continues to go up. And then maybe down the road, if he fills in eventually for that right tackle, if Braden Smith chooses to move on, if he does after this year, which his future is up in the air, or it becomes a long-term answer as kind of a swing tackle position for wherever you want to start on that side, because guys get hurt in the NFL, and we'll see if that. But for now, like it's a pick that to me makes sense because the Colts proved last year with making Matt Gonzalez their swing tackle that they don't fully trust Blake Freeland to be in that role right now.
Right, and they needed Gonzalez.
And so if you wanted Gonzalez to be on your line, which they said they liked him a lot last year, so you trust that he was a 3rd-round pick.
Right.
You draft 3rd-round picks to play big roles eventually, which again is why I was puzzled by the Walley
Wondering
pick.
about
Exactly. So they drafted Gonzalez. They talked him up all last year before the season, and like they want him to play. So I think that's why they're going to put him at right guard. And then they wanted to bring in more competition for that swing tackle role. So that's why it made sense to me. And I explained before that I thought if they went offensive line, developmental especially, it would be an outside guy. And that's who Travis is going to be. And so they're going to try to continue that trendward up with his development, and you hope that he doesn't have to play too much this year. But unfortunately, Blake Freeland and Matt Gonzalez have had to play over the last 2 years, the guys they took in the third or fourth round.
History says he's going to get some snaps, maybe play a couple of games.
Exactly.
Right?
And like I said, like being big on the offensive line is better than being small. And he is large. He is 3 of me. Like I said, literally, he's massive. He's huge. So
I followed the day 3 picks on the website. And so when I got to the headline for him, I said Colts draft mammoth tackle in the 4th round.
That is accurate. There is nothing wrong with that description. It is a big perfect description.
Could not, I mean, lots of big men, obviously. We're talking football, but that one just when they stand out, it's like, wow.
Very big man. You pointed out here, and you're describing him as the Colts traded down, several linebackers, including Jack Kaiser, went off the board. The 2018, I believe, Indiana Mr. Football from a couple years ago. I think it was 2018, as he led 1A Pioneer to an undefeated state title season as a
football player, Jack Kaiser.
Quarterback. And I think it was probably safety at Pioneer, but then he transferred over he became linebacker. He's played more games than anyone in Notre Dame history. That's pretty impressive. That
a lot of history there.
Exactly. So the COVID year helps out, but nevertheless, it doesn't matter. Like a storied program like that, a guy who carved out a role for himself for so long. But he went elsewhere, and the Colts take Jaylen Travis, which, like I said, position of need and a developmental guy, a large guy. And we'll see what he does this year. It's probably going to be something. We go to the 5th round, 151st overall. The Colts draft running back DJ Giddens out of Kansas State, who was not in my All-Raz draft, but I mentioned him at the end of All-Raz draft. So I'm not going to take credit for it. But I said, when I talked about him, I said I didn't take him, even though he had a good Raz score. I went somewhere else. I went with someone else because Giddens was not a great pass protector. And that is still true.
Mm-hmm.
So he needs to get better at pass protection. That is the one area, famously, that Jonathan Taylor has not been great at
not his strength.
During his career.
We'll very nicely
leave it like that. I don't need to say any more than that. Like anyone who's watched the Colts knows that. So DJ Giddens is another runner who's very productive, 1,200 plus yards in his 2 seasons as the starter at Kansas State. That's really stinking impressive. But if you can't protect for the quarterback, then what's the point? And if you're going to come in, like DJ Giddens is not going to be, he's not the traditional 3rd round back. Not at all. He's not like the scat back, the Darren Sproles type, the Nyheim Hines type, who Nyheim Hines would say he wasn't that type of back either, to be fair. But he's not that type of back. He's a bigger guy. Like he's more a guy that can come in and fill in for a series if you want for John. He's more the Trey Sermon type last year, but more versatile with better hands, with more speed. Exactly. Yeah.
Pass catcher.
Yes. Like a more athletic version of him, but still he had a very good RAS score, 9.78, which is great.
That's great.
Like really, really good athletic kid. And his RAS comps were Ahmad Green, who was very good for the Packers for a long time. Deuce McAllister, very good for the Saints for a long time. And IU's own Tevin Coleman, who had a couple really good years in the NFL before kind of injuries knocked him out of that. But DJ Giddens, again, this is a position we talked about that the Colts would draft at some point here in the draft as a backup running back. And they decided to go with Giddens. One thing that he added, Matt, that certainly would have impacted his pass protection ability was he had a wrist issue. Like there was some kind of
I think it was a ligament or something like that.
Yeah, ligament problems in his wrist that he played through last year, which you can see like that is kind of a reason why your pass protection is not as good as it could be. But for NFL players, like there's no excuse when you're on the field. You're asked to do it. Everyone will tell you that.
You got a wrist injury this week. Okay.
Yeah, well, are you good enough to play? Well, then get in there. We expect you to be exactly what you're supposed to be. And like, it doesn't matter to Anthony Richardson or whoever's playing quarterback if your running back has a wrist injury. You need him to block the blitzing linebacker and give you that extra 3/4 of a second to get the ball off.
And the staff is also hopeful that with that issue resolved, that will help improve his pass protection. I guess we'll see. Yeah,
another guy you described toughness for him. Like he's a 0-star recruit that had to work his butt off for everything that he's got, and he's got a lot. Like I said. Like production-wise, a very productive back. There are backs taken ahead of him who did not produce the way that he did at Kansas State. And so he should come in with a chip on his shoulder there, thinking that he's probably better than some of these other running backs that were drafted ahead of him. And if that's the case, you love to see it. He's So we'll see with Giddens.
Yeah,
but
I think it's a good pick for
we'll have
him.
a role. Yeah.
Again, I do wish nobody's perfect, and especially once you get into the 5th round or whatever. But when you know that your weakness is pass protection in the backfield, it'd be nice to have somebody who maybe has a little more,
Yep.
Pop there.
Yep,
But,
that's what I felt too. So
that's just me.
we'll
Or
see.
actually, it's just both of us.
Just
right?
both of us,
feel that
exactly.
way.
We go into the 6th round. The Colts had back-to-back picks in the 6th round after that trade in the 4th round to pick up an extra one for the Rams. At 189th overall, the Colts draft Riley Leonard, quarterback out of Notre Dame. They were expected to pick a developmental QB at some point.
Somewhere along the line.
And 6th round is exactly where they got Sam Ehlinger a couple years ago. And they used that same round to take Riley Leonard, led the Irish on a great run through the college football playoff all the way to the national championship game against JT Tuimoloau and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Was more known for his running ability in college, so could certainly throw the ball too. I'm not going to say that he can't throw.
But yeah, I mean,
but
he'll kill you with his legs.
Yeah, his running game was better than his.
He had
17
rushing touchdowns last year for the Irish.
That's remarkable.
That's
like a quarterback
amazing.
having that many. Exactly. So very strong runner who can evolve in the passing game and develop in the passing game. And the great thing when we got on the phone with Riley on the Zoom, like he had the Colts shirt on, he had the Colts hat on.
He was ready to go, wasn't he?
He was like, "Yeah, let's go." And he told us that the only place he wanted to be was Indianapolis. He only had 2 jerseys with him, or 2 shirts or hats with him. He had the Colts and he had the Ravens.
Oh, okay.
Because those are apparently the teams that he had the best talks with, or the most productive talks with. But he said that he wanted to stay here in Indiana, and every time the Colts were on the clock, he and his family were holding their breath that would be the time, and it was time for him in the 6th round. There will be no threat to Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson this season, but he's a guy right now that they're going to bring in and be in that Sam Ehlinger role and see if they can develop into something in the long term. And you can do a whole lot worse than a guy who is as tough as Riley Leonard was. Again, toughness, going back to that. Scoring 17 touchdowns as a quarterback. Not the biggest quarterback. Big enough, for sure.
Big enough, but yeah, not huge.
But taking pretty big hits from players all throughout the season.
Plays elite competition almost every week.
With Notre Dame playing elite competition and making it all the way to the national championship game. You can do a lot worse than a guy like that who took on a big role himself, transferring to Notre Dame from Duke. You can go to Duke and completely go beneath the radar and be just fine as a really good quarterback in the ACC. I'm not bad-mouthing the ACC, but you go to Notre Dame as a quarterback and the spotlight is on you. So you've got to welcome that. And he did, and he did what he brought the Irish all the way, like I said, to the national title game.
If they hadn't gotten off to such a bad start, and it really just came down to one big conversion at the end of that game. So he had him right there.
2,861 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, rushed for 906 yards. And like you said, 17 more touchdowns during his one season at Notre Dame. So Riley Leonard, the Colts' 3rd quarterback for the foreseeable future. Next pick in the 6th round, 190th overall, the Colts draft defensive tackle Tim Smith, who, again, was another position that I took in the Raz draft, even though I didn't take Smith. And also a very easy name to say.
Thanks for this one, right?
Exactly.
Throwing us a bone.
Chap would love to have every guy named Tim Smith.
Easy to spell, easy
Joe
to say.
Anderson. Yes, exactly. But Tim Smith here in the 6th round. On the adds to the interior defensive line. He's 6'2", 302 pounds, so not huge. Raz score was not great with a 4.44, not the type of player that, again, you expect Chris Ballard to draft. Fine with speed and agility, but explosion was what he did not have there in terms of, broad jump, vertical jump numbers. Those are kind of the explosion numbers that Raz takes into account. But he played a lot for
elite competition for an elite defense.
Exactly. And so under Nick Saban for several years before last year, him leaving, and the Washington coach, whose name is completely escaping me right now, coming in, former IU offensive coordinator too, and I'll remember it eventually. But anyway, they have guys on the inside with Grover Stewart, obviously, who's your starter, and DeForest Buckner, who's your starter. But in terms of competition behind them, there is some room. They brought in Neville Gallimore,
right,
from the Cowboys for the Rams.
Rams,
the Rams. You're right, and
And they let go of Taven Bryan.
Right, they let go of
Raekwon
Bryan.
Davis because that just did not work
Didn't
out
work.
at all for the Colts last year.
So there's some room there.
They had need there. They had
to
need.
compete in the middle, which is again why I had someone there in my Raz draft
absolutely.
that I expected them to bring that in. So like he didn't have big numbers. What the Colts what their scouts said about him was he has heavy hands, was the one thing that they kind of described as one of his traits that stood out on tape watching him. That just means you can knock people back.
You can push them back.
Like, and if you're not explosive like that comes from like middle body, from the abs down to the quads, in that area, your torso and your upper legs. Like if you're not explosive getting into the offensive line, you better have some heavy hands to be able to knock them around.
You've got to be able to compensate for that.
Yeah, if you have both, then fantastic. You can be a great player for a long time. If you got one, you can be at least a backup and play a rotational role. So Chris Ballard said that his defensive staff was kind of circling around them before the Tim Smith pick because they wanted him. They were like just kind of making their presence known as the Colts were getting to be on the clock there. So
again, fits a need.
Yep. And he's a developmental guy late.
Good pedigree.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we were having some trouble with the pictures
Matt.
that I pulled this week.
You son of a gun.
But it's interesting because you can go back to 2021 and you've got pictures of Tim Smith playing for Alabama, and you cannot say that for all these guys. Either they've got a different number because they weren't a starter that many years ago, or they're with a different team in the case of Jaylen Travis and Riley Leonard because they've transferred. This is a longtime guy, played at Alabama for a really long time as a starter, played a lot of games there. So that probably had a lot to do with the Colts being interested in him.
And the final pick in the Colts draft this year, safety Hunter Wohler out of Wisconsin, 7th round, 232nd overall. Another player who I did not draft in my all-Raz draft, but I mentioned at the end of the Raz draft saying, like, I would love to get some more bullets to take some more shots, and he was one of the players that I had mentioned, just didn't take him. With EJ Speed and Grant Stewart gone, there were some spots to be had at linebacker. Wohler played safety in college for the most part, but did play a little bit like all over the place too at Wisconsin.
They kept him up. He crept up close in the line and played in the box a lot.
Yep, and that's probably more the role the Colts would expect him to play as either the dime linebacker position, which I mentioned dime coverage earlier. If they're going to go to more defensive backs, Wohler would be a prime candidate to play in that scenario in big passing downs and passing expectations for your defense. But Wohler's a guy that like high RAS score, 9.26 out of Wisconsin, Chris Ballard's alma mater.
Yep.
Like there's no, you can't be surprised that he wanted him here.
4 of their 8 picks came from Big Ten schools.
Yep, exactly. And Wohler was the last one of them. I think that he's going to have a role on this team.
I do too.
Whether it's like, I think for sure there's obviously a spot in special teams with Grant Stewart gone.
He played a lot of special team snaps at Wisconsin.
Yes.
And with losing Stewart, as you mentioned, that's a lot of special team snaps to make up for.
Right. There are other players the Colts have had on their roster over the past couple years, and I think Cam McGrone is a good example that have played special teams. So. Shegu Olubi, who's played special teams, like maybe they step into more of the main roles, but that gives other ancillary roles. Again, those guys they still have special team snaps that are going to need to be filled, and Wohler I think will be on this roster at the end of the day. I don't know if Tim Smith will be. Like Riley Leonard, third quarterback, are they going to keep him on the roster? I highly doubt that. He's going to be a practice squad guy
that's going to be our third emergency quarterback on game day.
But again, I think that it's in the 7th round here. Wohler has a very, very good chance of making the Colts' final 53-man roster.
And you look at versatility, again, Big Ten school. He's not a kid who not that they don't want kids that transferred, but they like the stability of these kids that kind of keep at it and grow their roles at the schools that they're at. Big Ten school kid, played safety. They're going to kind of put him on the Jalen Carlisle plan, take him from safety to linebacker, because then they also know that in addition to the tackling, he was a very good tackler according to PFF. He's got the coverage skills, and what the Colts need at linebacker right now is a coverage linebacker. So they kind of thought outside the box a little bit here because they didn't maybe get some of the guys on the board earlier, but they've got a guy they think they can fill that role here with Wohler.
So we should touch on linebacker, since Wohler's the one linebacker they draft here in the 7th round. That's not to be the starter right now. They don't expect him to be that. So when you look at who's on the roster right now, and it's in a position that was not addressed in free agency significantly at all. That means Jalen Carlisle is your expected starter at will linebacker.
Expect a big role from him, and from what they talked about Ballard pre-draft, he kind of alluded to that.
Yep. And so like again, is that an ideal scenario? Probably not. But you're always going to go into a season with some less than ideal scenarios.
You can't load up every position.
Right.
If every team could, every team would have the best player at every position every time.
So Carlisle's like this is a risk if you don't go out and sign anyone to start him and to kind of have no one else on the roster, because like he's in his second year in the NFL. He's transferring from safety to linebacker from college to NFL. Right. This is not a position he's played forever. And he was injured for most of last year.
So a lot of that, we always talk about Anthony Richardson. We got to get him reps. We got to get him snaps. He's got to play. It's the same for all young players, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's the exact same on defense. And with his lack of that last year, sure, you make the most of your scenario. You do more film study. You probably try to get with the coaches and players as much as possible to understand what's going on the field. But you're not getting those reps. And so it's Zaire Franklin and Jalen Carlisle right now are kind of your main two linebackers. And Chris Ballard was asked kind of right out of the gates on Saturday after the draft about linebacker. And he did mention that under Gus Bradley, there were more like three positions, like the Mike, the Sam, and the Will.
Your three traditional linebacker spots, right?
Under Lou, he said there's really more just the Mike and the Will. It's really only two linebacker positions.
They do more nickel and dime, right?
They do more nickel. They do more dime specifically, which is what he's brought up a couple times over the past weekend. But so that there's not a need for as many linebackers,
and that probably tells you why they didn't reach at a linebacker earlier in the draft. And it may also explain a little bit more that third round pick that we're kind of scratching head. Maybe you need a bigger group of DBs.
But there are still significant roles that linebackers will play. The Will linebacker is still a very significant role when he's out there. Like it's pass coverage, it's guarding tight ends. Like if you're in man, for sure, it's guarding a short zone that a slot receiver will be running through. So you need guys that can cover in that area. And Carlisle's, hopefully he can cover. Right. Like he's played safety some. So we'll see.
And Carlisle also was a good athlete. I mean, it's a very similar pick in many ways to what they did with Carlisle last season.
Yes, but just a little bit further down, obviously.
Just further down the line,
in the seventh round.
Yep.
So the Colts draft grades from the national prognosticators, the experts out there, they got as high as an A from NFL.com. Thought that it was a pretty good pick. They loved the Warren pick and Tuimoloau and Giddens and Leonard later on. Let's see. The next highest, Pro Football Focus gave him a B+. They liked Walley in the third round because he had a good Pro Football Focus score, like you mentioned, which fantastic. ESPN gave him a B. They said they loved Warren, but fell short in helping the offensive line, which you can see that. You don't have the obvious starting right guard right now on the roster, even though it's obviously Gonzalez. It's just not. There's just not one obvious guy, from a national perspective that solidifies that. Like, you can't say that that's solid from a national perspective. You can say here in-house, like, we like Gonzalez a lot. That's where we're going to put him. But it's not like you're trotting out a guy who has 4 or 5 years of experience before and you know what you're getting out there. So saying it's solid, quote unquote, is probably just a step too far. A B+ from Bleacher Report. Did I say that? They considered Walley a reach in the third round again. ESPN gave him a B. CBS Sports gave him a B-, thinking they should have prioritized the offensive line earlier. And the Ringer gave him a C+, but still said they landed one of the most fun players in the draft.
It's weird. Like, you looked at the draft grades, and obviously they were very critical in Bleacher Report of the Walley pick, but they still gave him a B+. The Ringer, all they did was talk about how much they loved the Tyler Warren pick, but then they gave the Colts a C+ without talking about why that we didn't think maybe some of these other players balanced it out.
Again, this is gonna go to, I think, how well nationally the Colts roster.
Absolutely. 100%.
And how much you value taking good players versus taking good fits for needs. And I think the Colts got some good players in this draft and valuable players, but there was no obvious fill-in for two of the top 3 needs.
Right.
Top 3 needs going into this draft, we talked about till we were blue in the face for the last couple months. Tight end, right guard, will linebacker. Those were the three that just jumped off the page that you thought they needed to fill. There's others like cornerback. Chris Ballard always takes a cornerback. Backup running back, like third down running back we thought would be taken. Third string quarterback, which at the end of the day is completely insignificant, you hope, for your team this year.
You don't want to see Riley Leonard on the field,
but it's still something that you expected them to take. Like, defensive line, he's going to go for offensive swing tackle, were all like ancillary things that they filled most of those
almost every time.
Exactly.
Every draft.
But two bigger areas of need that were not touched, which is why, like, I understand why other players out there are giving the Colts B- C+ grades because
Absolutely.
like they did not address those.
Because especially if you're on the outside, looking in.
The addressing of those roles is kind of, to me, done via not drafting them in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like the addressing of right guard is they didn't take a right guard. Well, they have Gonzalez slotted to start there. Maybe they bring in a veteran as like competition for that spot. Maybe they view Danny Pinter as competition for that spot. Maybe.
Maybe Dalton Tucker has a better offseason in a good camp, and they think maybe we can try this again.
Right. They threw him in there last year, probably for a couple games, and we saw eventually how that worked out. But at will linebacker again, they say they like Jalen Carlisle there. Of course they do. But like when you're adding competition to as many places as you can, there's always going to be places that you have to bet on. And Chris Ballard is betting on Jalen Carlisle to step up. He is betting on Matt Gonzalez to step up. And then at other places, he added more competition to see where, things rises to the top, who rises at the end of the day. So we can give our draft grades. I believe Mike Chappell gave him a B, right? Is that what he told us?
Was it a B or
look
B
that up,
plus?
B or B plus? I think it was a B plus that he gave. Yeah, I think you're right. I find it hard to go lower than a B. Like I'm definitely in that B plus range myself because like Tyler Warren, I love the Tyler Warren pick. Obviously, if you couldn't tell,
it so heavily weights.
It's so obvious,
draft, right?
Yes, exactly. And you as a Colts fan, I think there was a lot of talk like pre-draft of Colston Loveland and trying to pump him up. Like Warren was just so much more productive. And he just so much more fits, it seems like, what the Colts need, being a 3-down guy, being a tough guy, and being a guy who can create some stuff for himself and be productive that way. And Loveland, more of a receiver tight end in that role, and a polished receiver at that, but maybe not as much of a 3-down tight end, but something that he would have to develop himself in that area. So, like, I think there was a talk up of Loveland before the draft for Colts fans specifically because they were thinking that Warren was going to go higher, and they were trying to get excited about Loveland. I get
excited about Loveland because this is the guy that's going to be there.
Be ecstatic about Warren, man. I think that 100%. They should be. So I'm going to go right in that B plus range, and I think you could either one of those are just fine. I'll give him a B plus because what the heck? I'm going to be generous on this day. So that's what I think. I like the kind of the picks down the line. I don't hate any of them. Walley is, again, Chris Ballard's betting on Justin Walley. And if he proves me wrong or my concerns wrong, then fantastic.
Yeah, we hope so. It's just from our perspective, it seemed a little curious.
And all the other guys make sense to me. When they drafted Tim Smith, like there weren't any great Raz guys on the board that I saw there. Again, my guy that I took, Ty Robinson, went a bit earlier. The Nebraska defensive tackle went to the Eagles a bit earlier. The Georgia defensive tackle, Tyrion Smith something, he had a hyphenated last name that I can't remember, but were guys that went a little bit earlier and just weren't available there anymore. So you got another guy that the defensive coaches seem to like. Again, you bet on the guys that your defensive coaches like and see what they can do with them. So yeah, I think this is a fine B plus draft. They filled in some spots and some roles that they need, and now we'll see if potential turns into reality over the next couple of months or years.
Chap's brief overview: B plus had to get a tight end and help replace Odengbo, which they did.
They did both of those things. Yep.
So I'm going to go just with a straight B. I don't think with room for an acceleration of that grade, depending upon how some of these guys work out. But I mean, really, if you just look at it by Warren by itself, it's an A plus draft.
Yeah.
I think pass rusher they got from Ohio State also very, very good. Beyond that, a lot of potential, a lot of good players. We kind of need to see how will shake out. I like the creativity of going out and trying to get a safety, converting to a linebacker to fit maybe that need a little bit, but it does leave you uncertain on what you're going to do with having some interior depth on the O-line and maybe a coverage linebacker that's a little more experienced at being a coverage linebacker. And those would be my, and the third round pick, I wasn't real sure. I didn't have a real clear vision on what that player was going to be for the Colts. Obviously they do,
right?
But since I don't, then that gives me the half grade letter down to a B.
And sometimes they can like explain that. Like you can ask Chris Ballard, why'd you go with Justin Walley?
It sounded like they were able to do that for every other pick that they made, but they didn't give a good on that one.
Yeah, I'm always saying you can convince me that I'm wrong, but you have to convince me that I'm wrong. Like my wife says that I'm stubborn, but I say you just can't convince me that I'm wrong. Like if you can, then fantastic. I'll change my opinion. I have no problem changing my opinion. That's great. I love being proven wrong because then I'm right at the end of the day. Like when things have been proven, I get it, but I don't get it. I just don't get it yet. So we'll see.
Make us see. Help us, show us the way on
exactly.
That one.
And one thing that I will add, like you should be grateful, Matt, that you're not doing this solo, because I was telling everybody back in the sports office during the draft that if the Colts drafted Shedeur Sanders, I was going to quit on the spot. Like I would have quit right there. I was like, nope, I'm not dealing with this. I'm not dealing with the circus. Like I'm not coming back to work on Monday. Not doing it.
Yeah, that'd have been a fun show. We had no video, sitting here by myself trying to figure things out, and
with video not working.
Just talking about Shedeur Sanders and the circus being in town.
Exactly.
Thankfully, we don't have to worry about that. I do, I didn't put him in the rundown. I was going to talk about him, but you did mention him. I was just going to say, I thought the coverage was really, really over the top there.
Quite.
If you are watching the draft, you're watching to see what your team, which player your team got. And for a lot of these young men, it's a big moment for them to have their name called on draft day. And instead, you're spending 5 to 10 minutes consecutively talking about Shedeur Sanders not being picked yet. I thought it was a poor choice of producing.
Didn't need that. I agree. Undrafted free agents, the Colts added 13 that we know of. Includes 4 wide receivers, 2 DBs, 2 defensive tackles, 2 defensive end, linebacker, running back, offensive lineman, and a kicker. Maddox Trujillo, maybe an intriguing one, had a couple of 60-plus yard field goals playing for the Owls of Temple. Let's go. Philadelphia Pride. He'll compete with Spencer Schrader. And that's what Chris Ballard said. Like he said, they want to bring in a strong leg kicker to compete.
And that is a strong leg kicker to compete, right?
And ancillarily, as we close out, we can say that Matt Gay signed a 1-year deal with the Washington Commanders. So he will be there in our nation's capital trying to earn a spot to play another NFL season, which I think he is an NFL kicker. I understand why the Colts wanted to move on again with him from here. So that's the Indianapolis Colts 2025 draft. Next week we'll get into the AFC South, and I know I talked about that briefly at the start of today, but we'll running out of time, so we're going to focus on that next week.
But they really drove the draft this year.
Yes, they did,
because they had the top pick. Jags made a move. Houston had 7 draft day trades, and then obviously there was a lot of focus on the Colts and Tyler Warren. So AFC South played a really big role in the draft.
Let's go AFC South. Come on now. Very exciting. All right. You can follow us online at Colts Blue Zone on Twitter. Individually, Matt is at Statomatty. I'm at DaveG_sports. Read all of Mike Chappell's work online at fox59.com, CBS4Indy.com. And you can follow him on Twitter as well, at mchappell51. If you're watching us now on YouTube or on Fox 59 Now, we certainly appreciate that. We are always available as a podcast on Apple, on iTunes, on Google Play, so many different places. Please subscribe, get us delivered to your podcast listening device as soon as we drop every week, and we greatly appreciate that. We'll see you next week for the Colts Blue Zone podcast.